I'm Dr. Rod Tayler from lowcarbdownunder.com.au. It's a pleasure to be talking with Emily Maguire. Emily's a dietitian from Scotland, from Edinburgh in Scotland, and she's currently visiting Melbourne. Emily, what got you into low carb?
For me, it started in the end of the second year of university. I started work or placement at a commercial company over the summer, and I didn't realise at the time, but it turned out to be a low-carb diet company. So my first day, I almost walked out because I thought, obviously we were taught it was very dangerous and you shouldn't be doing that. But I stayed and started looking through the evidence and had a very eye-opening awakening that summer. So I kind of got into there, finished off my degree. From there, went on to work with the company. And then afterwards as well, at the same time, went to do my master's in Obesity Science, where I did my research in low carb and diabetes, and pretty much it's all history from there. I myself started eating that way as well once I kind of really got into the nooks of all the science behind it.
Right. So what actually is low carb?
For me, low carb by definition is a diet which is devoid of sugars and starches and is a low carbohydrate intake overall. I set it around about a 50-gram carbohydrate intake per day. And on that other side as well, it's also about getting a high enough intake of good fats within your diet, as well as a sort of a more moderate level of protein, of which moderate again probably can be defined a little bit further. But it's still a good source of different types of vegetables as well within there, particularly non-starchy vegetables, small amounts of fruits, meats, fish, nuts and seeds. So very healthy diet in my opinion.
So how much protein should we have? Is this a high protein diet?
It's not probably high to what a lot of people think it is. I think when a lot of people think low carb, they think excessively high protein. It doesn't need to be along that side. However, it's not also a low protein diet. I generally class it as, to get into complete figures, around about sort of a 1 to 1.5 gram per kilogram lean body mass. And that works out sort of a good standard portion at each meal time. So although I don't term it and say the terminology high protein, it is a good level of protein there within the diet.
So you're saying we could eat more fat. So what fats would you recommend are safe for us to eat?
Fats that I recommend are fats like coconut oil and some grass-fed butter. Olive oil as well is really good as a dressing on salads, olives, some avocados, and a small amount from nuts and seeds as well.
What about fatty cuts of meat?
Yes, fatty cuts of meat, fatty fish as well. Pork belly with the crispy skin on top as well is all perfectly fine to have. Options like cream, full fat cream, small amounts of full fat dairy as well are other good fat options within there.
So this is turning upside down what we've always been told about diet and how we should avoid fat.
Yes, most definitely. Completely on its head from what I was taught at university as well. We're obviously taught to have more of your diet of these starchy carbohydrates, but actually having more of abundance of these fats within your diets is actually proven to be more beneficial, particularly in the aspects of health and weight management.
Now you've been treating patients with this approach for quite some time. What's the experience of your patients on this type of diet?
The experience overall is very, very good. I've seen people from obviously very obese individuals with a lot of complications like diabetes, heart disease, PCOS, underactive thyroid, and all of these conditions improve with a low carbohydrate program. So all really, really positive. Really good weight loss as well, and also maintaining that weight loss. And they see it as a lifestyle change as well, which I think is really important. So it's not just about a diet in the short term, it's about integrating this as a complete lifestyle change.
Now we hear quite a lot about the Paleo Diet these days. Is this like the Paleo Diet?
In my opinion, I think it's all quite similar. It's maybe all cut from a similar kind of cloth. The Paleo Diet have a little bit more strict rules in terms of you're not allowed dairy, which obviously within low carb you can have a little bit within there. They also maybe allow some more starchy carbohydrates, things like sweet potato and other tubers within there. However, the overall ethos of it is about getting back to eating real food. So I obviously always go with a low carbohydrate template. It's also quite different, particularly when you get to a ketogenic level as well. So yeah, I can see it from both sides, but sometimes I think, is it words and terminology with it as well.
What about fruit? Fruit contains quite a bit of sugar, doesn't it?
Fruit does. My sort of teaching with it is I'd always rather people get their vitamins and minerals from their vegetables first and foremost. Fruit does contain a lot of fruit sugars within there, particularly things like bananas, grapes and apples. They're really quite high. Berries are a low sugar fruit, so having that for people that aren't as insulin resistant would be okay to have that within their diet. But it's much better to get your, as I say, your vitamins and minerals through your vegetables, I would prefer.
So in the course of a normal day, what do you eat?
Me personally, so in the morning, generally my breakfast is a couple of eggs, and I'll change that around. I'll sometimes have it scrambled or an omelette. I will try and get a veg portion in the morning, so generally have some mushrooms or some spinach, and then either some salmon or some bacon or some ham, depending on what I have. Lunchtime is generally just a salad or some kind of big stir fry. If it's a stir fry, I often put a lot of some cream cheese in there, a little bit of mozzarella, some smoked salmon, fry all that up. And then evening meal could range from anything from a pork stroganoff with cauliflower rice to a low-carb pizza to a steak with just some green vegetables and some butter on top of my steak as well.
Low-carb pizza, how do you do that?
Me personally, the recipe that I use is with ground almonds. So literally just some ground almonds, an egg and some water. Mix it up like you would the normal pizza base, bake it up and then top it up with whatever toppings you would like.
Sounds good. Now you mentioned there ketogenic. I've heard about the ketogenic diet. What's this to do with?
So a ketogenic diet is about changing the way your body's fueled, basically. So under normal conditions, your body is fueled with glucose or the sugar from carbohydrates. When you go ketogenic, what you're putting your body into is a state of ketosis. And that is that your body can no longer get the energy from glucose. So it switches to using its fat stores. And from that produces these ketone bodies. And it's these ketone bodies that can produce and sustain the body with the energy that it requires, that it needs to thrive. There's a little bit one step further, and there's a lot of disease states that are now looking at this therapeutic use of ketone bodies, so using the ketogenic diet. So epilepsy, for example, is probably one of the most studied areas of using a ketogenic diet. And now where the research is going is looking at things like dementia, Alzheimer's, and also certain cancers as well.
Great. Emily, thank you. Now, tell us, what are your plans from here in Melbourne onwards?
From here onwards, so I've already just come from the first international conference in South Africa. Flew into Australia, so I've been to Perth, Adelaide and Melbourne. From here, I'm heading on to Canberra and Sydney. Then I'm heading on to the States with the first stop to be Paleo FX. And then heading over to the West Coast and meeting some people there, Michael Eads obviously over there, then heading back to the East Coast and joining the Low Carb Cruise where I'll be presenting. Then stayed in Florida for a little bit of time after to meet with Dominic D'Agostino, and then going up East Coast to see Eric Westman, hopefully as well as Thomas Seyfried, Jeff Volek and Jean Fine as well. So very busy.
Are you planning on further study, or are you going to be working clinically?
Ideally, I'd like to do a little bit of both if I could, but really what I'm looking to do is hopefully go back and do my PhD within the ketogenic area, particularly within cancer research. So this is kind of part of the reason why I'm going to meet all these different people, see what's going on with the research, see where we're at, see if I can get a research question developed and where I'd like to be to do my PhD as well.
Emily, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure talking with you.
Thank you for having me. Well, it's nice to meet everyone. Thank you guys for coming along. Very impromptu evening. So I'm just going to kind of run through a little bit about, it's been really good to hear where everyone's backgrounds come from and how everyone got here. So just really briefly, I am from Edinburgh, as my accent suggests. This picture I actually took just before I left the country. So this is at the airport if you're ever there. I just thought I'd add in some of these. It's generally very beautiful, but this is generally what the weather is actually like. And this was the day before I left as well. So this is the Scottish Parliament just beside the Holyrood Palace. So my background, so basically I did my my BSc in nutrition from Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh, and I'll come back on to how I got into low carb from there. And then from there I went on to do my MSc in Obesity Science and Management. And I was really lucky to do my master's at this centre because they were a really progressive centre there. And this is kind of really where it solidified sort of low carb for me. I actually did my thesis work in diabetes and low carbohydrate programme. So I'm not expecting you to read all this, but this effectively was what my thesis was on. So I was comparing obese type 2 diabetics in comparison to obese non-diabetics, just looking at different parameters. And just very briefly, in the type 2 diabetic group, I analysed them and broke it down even more and found exactly what we would expect to find. All their parameters improved basically to that of a normal individual, and every single person that was on medication in the programme either reduced it significantly or came off it altogether. So that's kind of where I came into from that side on education. How I actually came into low carb though started by this little company in Edinburgh that was called Go Lower. When I was in my second year, just finishing up, going into third year, I took a summer placement at this company. And I, probably being the student I was, didn't do as much background research as I probably should have going into starting this first day. And I turned up and I found out this company was all based on low carb diets. I actually considered almost phoning up and reporting them to someone because I thought they were doing complete harm to people. Like, I genuinely turned up and thought, they can't do this. She started, the person in the company started talking about ketones, and I'd literally just finished a biochemistry class on why you shouldn't do Atkins. That was basically what we got taught. So I stayed for the first day, and I got handed a bunch of papers that she wanted me to read through, and I had to start collating for the people at the office that was based there. And I started reading through Eric Westman's work. It was the papers that I started looking at. And so I stayed there the 8 weeks. I didn't leave and walk out and report them to anyone. And I was completely blown away by it. So I was kind of in a unique position. I went back into my third year, and I was having read all the science by this point in the summer. I then went back to my university, who was a very, very low fat advocating nutrition and dietetic department, really significantly low fat. I was still a student that didn't feel that I could stand up there and say anything to them. So I sat through my final 2 years, kind of having to tick all the boxes. I had to get that piece of paper, so I had to finish my exams and write what they wanted to write, even though it was very, very difficult to do that. But I did it, finished my 4 years, and then, as I said, went on to work for this company as a senior nutritionist. We built up a really good team there. Unfortunately, they had financial difficulties, so that's kind of part of the reason as to where I'm going from here. So that was all really, really quite good within there. I actually took a bit of a longer time for me to get into the diet as well. Unlike, I think, everyone else, when they kind of first found out about it, was all very excited. I was still really skeptical because I was kind of thinking, this still can't be true, even though I was sitting there reading all this stuff. So I gradually started following the diet myself. I initially started giving up crisps. It was crisps for me and potato chips that I used to eat in abundance. And I gave them up, and I think within a month I lost about 5 kilos. That's how many packets of crisps I probably ate. And then obviously slowly from there started giving up things like bread. Again, that was my weakness for me, and really sort of had a change within there. So I am a bit more radical when it comes to it. So now this is basically me. This is I have my site, so it's called Carb Genesis. I do see or consult with a lot of people online now as well, so I've taken it on with there. However, what I'm doing at the minute, so this is now my life for the next year, is literally living out of these bags. So as Rod said, I decided to embark on people call a slightly crazy journey that I've taken. I knew a lot of people in the States, having gone to some of these conferences, but I just felt it wasn't enough. And what you can get from meeting people at these places is just so much more, you know, as you see it coming together and talking. And so I decided, and I had this crazy notion that I was going to take off and go to the key countries where everybody was, meet them, see what was happening, really immerse myself in it, and take it from there. So this is kind of, I suddenly realised how busy this slide was, but this is some of what was happening at the conference that was there. So actually, I don't know if you'd seen this picture, but we had this one in here. So you can see that it was obviously a really amazing conference. This was the start of my trip, which is obviously leading me on to Australia. So I've been here since the end of February. From here, I'm heading on to the States. My first port of call is Paleo so I'm quite excited about that. I've not been to it at all yet. And then I'm going around quite a bit in the States, seeing people like Mike Heeds, then Don D'Agostino, working in Eric Westman's clinic, and then some other kind of key people in and around the States. So this is where I'm at the minute. So I just wanted to take you through a little bit on kind of my take on LCHF, and it's quite interesting having done this tour as well, because although I think a lot of us, how we practice it, we are, you know, we're all kind of on par with it. But when you get into the nitty gritty, I think there is a lot of maybe differentiation, like on the protein, you know, and I know that's kind of what Rod and I have been discussing quite a bit as well. So I thought I'd just take you through kind of what I do with clients and the kind of people that I see. This I did actually take from Gary Fettke. I did double check with him that I could use this within here. I quite like it. He put it up on social media, so you guys might have seen it. So it is, I have ketones and I'm not afraid to use them. When I first started out particularly, and I don't know if you kind of felt the same with this, but being and coming from the sort of dietetic nutrition world, it takes a lot to kind of speak to other sort of dietitians and things, because you literally are the person that's going out, you know, on your own, and they just, it's a very different conversation to have with them. So it's taken me all this time, and I love ketogenic diets. I think they are very beneficial. I use them a lot with my clients. My kind of starting point with people, I have a bit of a sort of a template with people that I do have. I generally start people off on around about a 50-gram carbohydrate level. Protein level, again, it's coming into this moderate. So I would never say to someone that it is a high protein diet, because I don't think it is a high protein diet in the consensus of what people think high protein is. That being said, I definitely would never go as low as a 50-gram intake. I don't think I've ever had anybody on 50 grams of protein. So I kind of work around the same levels of what sort of Steve had recommended in the past. That's kind of where I got my teaching from. So I have around the 1 to 1.5 kind of protein level within there. And then generally when we take care of that, the fat kind of takes care of itself. I often find with a lot of people that it's actually, you need to counsel them to actually get their fat up. Most people take a long time to really understand that they need more fat within their diet. So they're still a little bit scared. Quite a lot of the people that I deal with as well have been people that have tried doing this themselves, and I'll come on to kind of pitfalls that most people I find once they come to me. I've dealt with a huge array of people, from obviously just people looking to lose weight, people with PCOS, diabetes, different types of insulin resistant problems within there. It's all with different varying results. Also do work with a lot of people with thyroid issues as well, and I know this is quite a bit of a hot topic and that some people think it's very dangerous and detrimental to people with thyroid issues, but if you formulate the program properly and you do take care even of the calorie content as well, I've had really great success with people with underactive thyroids, so I've not seen any issues in practice, and there's definitely no clinical evidence that I've either seen or people have presented to me, so it's not an issue that I've come up with. This is a quote from Robert Atkins, and this is from his 1972 original work that he had. And I really like it because this kind of sums up what I do with clients as well. So that is that there isn't a short-term approach, it's a lifelong way of eating. You'll end up with a diet that's as personal to you as a pair of contact lenses. So although I say I have this starting point, I often, when I speak to people, say that what your diet looks like now to where obviously we get you to can be very different. And likewise, a ketogenic diet for you could look very different to a ketogenic diet from somebody else. I think sometimes, and again, it's just through my personal experience, we get so many people that come to me and think, well, my husband's doing it this way and it's working well for him, but you know, and they're trying to follow exactly the same, but it's not always that way. You've got to kind of look at sometimes the variations, and it's okay to kind of, you know, play about with that. You know, once you've got your starting point and you're quite comfortable with the foods, what you should be having, how it fits in with your lifestyle, then obviously it's looking about how we can play about with that. And whether it is bringing in things like intermittent fasting, I'm quite a huge fan of intermittent fasting as well. Some people then, if they start integrating sports, etc. in, then there's sometimes playabouts that we need to make with that as well. So I think it's just getting away from this rigid thinking that you just need to follow that and that one way and that's going to work for everyone. It's definitely not, and that's not my experience with it either. So this is kind of, sorry, this is a bit more wordy here, but this is kind of what I find that people get wrong, particularly when they come to me. So, like for example, I just had a client quite recently, and she's listened to all the podcasts, she's read the books, you know, she's got a lot of great knowledge behind her. But she came to me and she just, you know, she wasn't losing weight, she was having really severe cramps. For, you know, she was on it for about 8 weeks and just could not get rid of the cramps. Now that's not normal. And as it turns out, we found that there were some things that she had done, and namely it was that she wasn't supplementing properly with magnesium, for example, and she wasn't having sort of bone broth in there. We've added that back in and she's completely fine. So things that I find is that a lot of people think it is just about low carb. So some people I've actually had come to me who are literally just eating some meat and some fats, and that's all they're having. They have absolutely nothing else within there. They think that they can eat butter in abundance quite often. So again, there's this concept, and then it's probably even a whole topic in itself, so I won't touch upon it too much, but it's this, is a calorie, and all that kind of aspect within there. Now, whilst I'm not saying that you need to count calories, I am saying that at a certain point, you know, if you are struggling to lose weight, then it might be because your volume of what you're having is still a little bit too much for you within there. It's not formulated properly. One of my major things, this comes on to the next part of the micronutrient status as well, is kind of coming from that nutrition background, is that quite often, and I did it when I first started in practice, all I cared about was just getting people to hit those macro numbers. You know, if they got their carbs low enough and you got the protein right, then, you know, I didn't really think too much about obviously nutrient status from there, which is obviously not what you should be doing at all. And quite often the problem is with the micronutrient aspect is you won't notice that you're deficient in anything, you know, within the first few weeks. It's not going to happen that way. These take a long time to develop and to manifest. So making sure that you do have, you know, sort of a really good abundance of vegetables within your diet is really important. And have a fear of fat. Quite often I've had people who are trying to do low carb and low fat together, which if anyone's ever tries it, it is, you know, you're miserable. Your body's getting no energy really from anywhere within there. So that's quite a common one. And then the protein intake. So this is something that is definitely, I've been starting to see a lot more, and I think ketogenics evolved. When I first got into particularly looking at ketogenic science, this aspect of the protein and the moderation, yes, if you eat too much protein, it does cause a gluconeogenic response. But I think people have gone to the other extreme in thinking that you just need to be really, really low and that'll really help it. And that's not the case either. If I had to give you exact figures, I think it's very difficult. Again, it's going to be very individual based, and it's obviously about measuring, but I think it's really important just to kind of sort of bear that in mind, that it's not just about going excessively low on the protein level as well. And then, so this is kind of, I suppose I just put it in here for kind of where I see it going, and hopefully. I've always had this notion, and one thing I'd always love to do, and what I suppose my overall goal is to get low carb accepted pretty much at government level. Pretty much started off in the UK is kind of where I'd love to see it going with it. I'd love to see people who are going through university degrees like me actually being taught this kind of stuff, not coming out and now having to trawl our way through it all. So part of what I'm doing here is hopefully going to influence that later on with some other aspects that I'm looking to do with it in here. But I think what everyone's doing is just amazing, and we work from the ground up. I think that can only influence everyone within there. So that is me, and that is everything for this evening. So I know everyone's hungry and I won't keep you much longer.